Shalom. We're continuing the lessons on monotheism, idolatry, and the occult. In the last lesson, we ended by a short analysis of Exodus 32 from verse 1 to 4, which is the event of asking Aaron to make the Israelites that came out of Egypt a God that will lead them and go before them. And he asked them for the golden earrings and their jewelry, and especially from the women, their wives. And the miracle was that the wives agreed to give it in order to make this golden calf, an idol, an image of the goddess Hathor of the Egyptians, the goddess of wisdom. And essentially, what I ended the lesson with is saying that belief in one God is wisdom, because it looks at the whole picture. It takes account of every aspect of nature, the sun, the moon, the tide going up, going down, the winds and the rain and the snow and the harvest, and every aspect of life is taken into account, because there is only one God, one source, one creator, and one manager that is managing continuously the world. There are three basic concepts in the West of how our world is managed. The first concept is the concept that God created the world. He gave rules of nature, and he gave it a good kick into space, into orbit, and from then on, nature took over. The forces of nature direct the world. The second concept is kind of the Greco-Roman concept, the Platonian concept or Neoplatonian concept, and that is that God created the world and he gave the rulership over the material world to Satan, and God is interested and in charge and invests mainly into the spiritual things. The material things are in this world, and they are basically part of the dominion of the flesh, the dominion of the material world, which is the dominion of the devil, that is the Lord of this world. And God is dealing with the spiritual issues, with the heavenly issues, with love and grace, angelic singing, and everything that is wonderful and beautiful. The biblical view, which is, my opinion, is also the Jewish view, and is that God is involved in everything in this world. Every single aspect is under God's control. And even if an elephant steps on a mouse in the middle of the jungle and nobody sees it, it's still God's doing. And if a tree falls in the forest, the prophet says, is it in vain? No, God purposed it. Everything in this world, every second of the world's time, is a part of God's dominion, the one God that rules his creation day and night, 24/7, every year and all the years, and nobody else is there beside him. And we're going to, in the future, go back to Isaiah 45, verse 7, 8, and 9, and see this in its clearest statement in the Bible, that there is one God and one God only. He created light and darkness, perfection, shalom, wholeness, and evil. That's not my statement, folks. This is Isaiah's statement. But for now, we're going to return back to Exodus chapter 32, and we are going to look at the retelling of the story when Moses comes down off the mountain. Aaron is retelling the story, and we're going to look at Exodus 32, and we're going to start reading from verse 19. And it came to pass, as soon as he came nigh unto the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger waxed hot, and he cast the tables out of his hands and brake them beneath the mount. And he took the calf which they had made and burned it in the fire, and ground it to powder, and strewed it into the water, and made the children of Israel drink of it. And Moses said to Aaron, what did this people unto thee? What did they do to you, in other words? That you should have brought so great a sin upon them. And Aaron said, let not the anger of my Lord wax hot. Thou knowest the people, that they are set on mischief. For they said unto me, make us gods, which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what became of him. And I said to them, whosoever has any gold, let them break it off. So that they gave it to me. Then I cast it into the fire, and there came out this calf. Let's analyze the difference between the retelling of what happened by Aaron to Moses and the first retelling of the story from chapter 2, verse 1 through 4. In both cases, Aaron blames the people. The people came to me, the people asked me, the people, in essence, forced me to produce for them a man-made God that will lead them. Why? Essentially, Moses, you're to blame because you didn't tell them what's going to happen. You didn't present them with a program. You didn't show them a log in the calendar of what you're going to be doing and when you'll be coming back. And so the people came to me and said, give us a God that will lead us. Like Moses led us before, we don't know what happened to Moses. So I asked them to give me the gold, and they gave me their gold, and I just threw it into the fire, and poof, magically, a golden calf came out of the fire. That's how Aaron retells the story. In the first account, he asked them for the gold earrings and the gold jewelry specifically. The rabbis say he had hoped that they won't give it because women don't naturally and easily part with their jewelry. And then in the first story, Aaron took graven tools of engraving, of making, and he made the golden calf. You could say he sculptured it. Yeah. In the second story, he didn't sculpture it. He just threw the gold into the fire, and magically, suddenly, a golden calf appeared. Aaron was trying to pass the blame on the people and on the idol, on the forces of nature that through the fire produced this golden calf. It's a very important aspect in this story because in essence, idolatry is mixed with the forces of nature. If idolatry didn't have any force, any powers, any success, any prosperity, any blessing for the people, they wouldn't worship. They wouldn't take a piece of wood, the way Isaiah describes it, carve it out. With what's left over, they would make a fire to warm themselves up and cook their soup on it. And what they carved out would be the object of their worship. They wouldn't do that because they know it's stupid. But they had understood and they had seen the forces of nature, and they embodied the forces of nature. They essentially made what is ethereal, what is abstract, what is energy and force into a physical representation. And that's why the Apostle Paul and Moses in Deuteronomy 32 says, those that sacrifice to idols sacrifice to demons. That's both in 1 Corinthians 8 and in 1 Corinthians 10. I think verse 20 in 1 Corinthians 10. They sacrifice to demons. In other words, it's not the statue itself, because if you worship the physical image only, this is not classical idolatry. It is fetishism, where you attribute forces to the thing, to the statue, to the piece of wood, to the piece of gold, to the piece of silver, to the piece of stone. You attribute forces to the idol itself, to the representation of the idol itself. But most of the idolatry is not that kind of idolatry. It's a very, very primitive form of idolatry. Most of the idolatry is they realize that there are forces, and the idol is the container of the forces. Baal, the god Baal, that is the most famous god in the Bible, in which Israel fell worshiping him for hundreds of years, and the prophets kept speaking against the worship of Baal. And Hosea chapter 2, and Hosea the prophet, in fact, says that Israel married the Baalim, the Baal. The word Baal means husband, or somebody who is the owner, your master. And so the Baal was the god of rain and thunder and lightning. And on one hand, he held a jagged knife. On the other hand, he held a spear that was like the lightning in his hand. And he was the god that resurrected when the rainy season starts. When the land receives the first rains in the Middle East, it starts becoming green. Normally, we don't have rain for several months of the year. Sometimes even up to 8 months of the year, we don't have rain. And so everything gets brown and yellow and dry. And suddenly, in September sometimes, during the feast of Sukkot, most of the time, the first rain comes. And with the first rain, the land starts to become green. Life returns to the land. And that is what they were worshiping when they were worshiping the Baal. It was the worship of the forces of nature that are represented by a statue of a man holding a jagged sword in one hand and the lightning rod in the other hand. If you visit Israel, you can visit the Israel Museum. You'll see several small and bigger statues of Baal. Yeah? But if I return back to Aaron and Moses, what is it that Aaron did between the first telling of the story in chapter 32 of Exodus, verse 1 through 4, to the second telling of the story to Moses in the same chapter in verses 21 and 23? The difference is this. Aaron attributed the creation of the idol to the forces of nature. He says, I threw the gold into the fire and poof, magically, a golden calf appeared out of the fire. It's not my doing with my hands. It is the forces of Hathor, of the golden calf, that came out of the fire. In other words, I'm not to blame for it. There is power in this idol. And when people attribute power to anybody but the one and only God, creator of the universe, to the Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one God, to anybody else, to anybody less than the oneness and the unity of God, and to anybody more than the oneness and the unity of God, it's an idol. You can attribute the forces to nature, to the sun, the moon, the wind, the stars, the fire, the rain, whatever you want. All of these things have power. They are forces, but we are not to worship a part. We are worship the oneness, the wholeness, the unity of God as one. May the Lord bless us. We will continue our study in the days to come.